Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Bodhi Tree Buddhism for what course are we? This is our third course, and it's the third class in our third course on Mindfulness Meditation. So welcome along, everyone. I know that there are people out there in Facebook live stream land. So if you're out there, please drop us a comment in the little comment section that's coming with the live stream video, just to let me know that you're all out there and that we're, that the live stream is going through successfully. Okay, so as we just said, this is our third class. We're just doing 6 in this series. Oh, good morning, Mika. Nice to see you there. Hope you're doing well. I don't know, you've finished your semester now and into your first, yes you are, you're the first one to join us this morning. Good to see you. So it's the third class. We're doing 6 in total, and we're going to continue today with mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of inhalation and exhalation, ānāpāna, and wrap up this section. And then for the next couple of weeks, we're then going to move on into the other 3 grounds of mindfulness, feelings, mental states, and then dharmas. And we're going to also talk a little bit today about how mindfulness of the breath is actually kind of like the thread that then connects through all the other forms of mindfulness, at least as one way of practicing it. It's not like the only way to practice, but it definitely is one way that we can do it. Okay, I also see Mei Feng has joined us there. Nice to see you. And thank you too also for always sharing any messages and notifications of the live streams. It's really appreciated, putting out the word, letting other people know what we're doing here. Okay. As usual, if there's any issues with the streaming, like the sound or the video or whatever, please just put a little comment in the comments section. Everything should be good to go. I think as of last week, once we started to use an Ethernet connection rather than the Wi-Fi, things seem to be a lot more stable, and just me working out how to operate all this stuff has obviously helped a lot. Okay, just a comment from Mika. I was just kind of going to ask you and say, because the semester, and okay, for those of you that don't know, Mika is also at the same university, NTU, where I am, and I was just about to make a comment that because the semester's finished, and so then we're officially starting the summer break, so how that was going. But then, as he's just saying, he's at the research center rather than being like a teaching faculty, so kind of the whole semester thing probably doesn't mean much to you. Okay, it does to me. Okay, so as my classes at uni have finished, I'm doing the grading. And now, my only class that I've got going at the moment is this one here. Okay. Where were we? So, welcome along, everyone. See, maybe we've got somebody else who's joined us just in the last minute or two. Maybe we should just jump right on in and start to go back to our text and see what we've got in our text there. Maybe before that, okay, I see Terry's joined us there as well. Nice to see you there, Terry, and everyone else who's coming through from the Philippines. See, you've been doing a lot of work lately for your Kalyana Center, and I hope that's really having a good effect to reach out to some of your own local people there and introduce them to some of these really valuable Buddhist teachings. Okay. Before maybe I jump into the text itself, maybe we don't need to look at the text for this, just do a little bit of a review of how mindfulness and the different foundations of mindfulness work, just a little refresher. There's a lot of things I think in Buddhist teachings that we've heard before, we kind of know the principle, but it doesn't really mean that we've necessarily really embodied that principle. You say it almost any Buddhist, conditioned phenomena are impermanent. And, I think if you've had any kind of contact with Buddhism, you've heard that kind of idea and that kind of statement before. It's not something that's new to us. So, if you tell someone, hey, did you know Buddhism teaches conditioned phenomena are impermanent, no one's going to go, really? Like, I've never heard that before. Everyone's like, yeah, of course I know that. Of course I know that. But of course, there's a big difference between saying, like, I know that, like, I've heard that teaching, and then every moment of my life, I am actually living and acting as though I have that awareness and that knowledge that things are impermanent. We don't, right? So there's always that big gap between just kind of like knowing something, as in like I know that piece of information, and having that as something which is kind of like this basic fixture of the way in which we see the world and the way in which we act in the world. So I'm saying this now before I get in and just kind of do a bit of a review of some of the content that we've already covered so far. And one good example of this, I remember at a summer program quite a few years ago. So the program goes for like a month, and with the students, it's their, probably one of their first, if not their only time when they have this really intense and really in-depth full immersion experience of Buddhist life within inside a monastery. And there are certain like concepts that will come up all the time. And it just so happened that year, like so many people were just using this exact same story from the Chan school. And so one of the teachers mentioned it probably on day 1 or day 2, and then a few days later somebody else mentioned it and somebody else mentioned it. And it got to a certain point, one of the students like kind of responded with saying like, oh, we've heard this story like so many times, I've heard this story like, 4 or 5 times in the space of a couple of weeks. To which one of the senior monastics just turned to the student and said, I've heard this story probably like 100 or 200 times in the course of 30 years of being a nun. Now, the point being, like, yeah, you got to hear the story, but do we really like understand it? So that's also, I think, why we often talk about Buddhism as practice. When you do a practice, it's not something that's necessarily new. It's something that you already know and you can do, but practice makes perfect, right? That's kind of the key thing. So, back to mindfulness. We were first of all looking at a text called the Satipatthana Sutta. So the teaching, the sutta, on we could say the establishments or the foundations, which is patthana, of mindfulness, sati. Okay, so in Chinese, it's sometimes called Nian Chu Jing or Nian Zhu Jing. So Nian is mindfulness, Chu or Zhu. They're just different translations of the same word, but they give you a couple of kind of different like angles on it. So Chu is like a basis for something. It can be literally like a place, but that can be like a place, like a foundation, a basis, a focal point. But you also have Zhu, which means literally to stand. So that's something where you establish or you set up your mindfulness. Right. So when we talk about then Satipatthana, it's got these two aspects to it. On one side, it's the thing, like the objects that we focus on, but it's also, we focus on for the mindfulness, but then it's also the actual establishing of that mindfulness itself. So you've got these kind of two aspects to it. And certain traditions emphasize particular aspects of that. Now, of these establishments or foundations of mindfulness, usually we get taught 4. That's kind of the very standard explanation. There are 4 foundations of mindfulness, 4 establishments of mindfulness. The first one is the body. The second one is feelings or sensations. The third one is mental states, mental phenomena. And the last one is, the term is Dhamma or Dharmas, but we have there's a bit of a trick to like how we're going to then translate and understand that in English, because the term Dharma or Dhamma does have like a really wide range of different senses here. So I've been just using the term dharmas. Some places they will specifically translate it as like mental phenomena, but as we're going to see, probably in like the last class of this little series, I don't think that's the best term. It really here refers to like, because it's talking about things like the 7 factors of awakening. It's talking about things like the 4 noble truths. The 4 noble truths, I mean, in a way they are like states of mind because it's a mode of understanding. But really it's kind of like these truths that are expressed through the Dharma teachings is really what we've got there. Okay, so you've got these four, and when we were first looking at the sutra itself, you'll note that for the first one, so mindfulness of the body, the text does spend quite a bit of time talking about this. And there are lots of it's not like one practice, and even mindfulness is not really like one practice. There's lots of, because there's different foundations or different establishments. So it can be broken down, and even those smaller focused ones themselves can be a really full and complete form of a practice. So we sort of shouldn't just look at this as being something that's quite simple, just like it's just mindfulness. To really be able to establish and train in that in a particular area, can have a lot of focus. And there is also the aspect that different people might be more suitable for different types of mindfulness. So for example, when we're talking about mindfulness of the body, one of the first ones that we kind of spend a bit more time with was like the postures of the body, right? So again, traditionally there are 4 postures. We can have sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. But of course, it's not just limited to those, right? Sometimes we can be in a posture which is like halfway between these, like if you're like lounging, slouching on the couch, like are you lying or are you sitting? In many ways, while we often emphasize like having a good and like a proper posture for say sitting meditation or even standing or lying meditation, but when we look at the mindfulness sutras themselves, actually the emphasis is more on it doesn't matter what posture you're in. The key point is, are we being mindful of that posture? So we also saw that as well. You've got, first of all, for the body, you've got strictly, when you're sitting, standing, walking, or lying. But then you've also got this other broader element of whatever you're doing. So when you're putting on your clothes or taking off your clothes, whether you are, so in the sutras, because it's talking to monks and nuns, it's about putting on your robes or taking off your robes, but the principle is the same. Carrying your begging bowl, or for us we could say when we're eating or drinking, right? Take your cup and have some water, and we're being mindful of that. The act of reaching out my hand, touching the cup, picking up the cup, moving it towards my mouth. I feel the contact of the cup on my lips. I taste the water, and so on and so forth. Each of these things can be something that we do mindfully. And we can also have lots of other actions as well. Now, in theory, you could do this in any activity, but I think it's easier when we're doing it more in what we might call manual work. So if you're doing something like cooking, for example, right? The movements of your hands, you might be beating some batter or some mix, cracking an egg. Yeah, all of these things are physical things. So you can be very aware of those actions when you're cutting with a knife. It's actually a very good time to be mindful, right? Cutting. Do you know how to cut properly? Are you really paying attention to the position of your hands and your fingers and the blade of the knife? If you're doing gardening, right? You might be doing something. You might be moving some soil here or there. You might be pruning some leaves or something like that, right? These are all actions that we're doing that we need to pay attention to. Sports are another area whereby mindfulness can be really easily applied. And we can also see in particular there are some kinds of sports or physical activities that even if we don't use the term mindfulness, we can see the connection. Martial arts, of course, is a well-known one, or yoga, because think of them as being Asian or Eastern and connect them with various forms of meditation practice. But even something like dancing, for example, imagine being a ballerina. You have to pay incredible attention to the position of your body to maintain your balance, right? And so there can be all these other things as well. Often I think when it comes to the idea of being mindful of the body when doing sports, we have a slightly different term, and it's even this term, the zone, being in the zone. This is already being used in psychological circles as well, to study what's that state like, what's that psychological state when the mind is really focused on this activity. And so, we might have a different term, but in many ways, the basic act of being mindfully aware of the physical actions of the body is the same. That basic bit is the same. Though, of course, for the Buddhist side of it, there are some specific differences where it's not just paying attention to what you're doing, there's also the element of a contemplation, right? So in all of these activities, be it walking, standing, sitting, or lying, eating, drinking, going to the bathroom, having a shower, putting on your clothes, taking off your clothes, cooking, gardening, doing housework, sweeping the floor or vacuuming, okay, all these things. We're not just being aware of the body, but we also had those contemplations and reflections that involve things such as being aware of the arising, the coming into being of this state, and also the cessation of that state. So how something starts and how something ceases to be. When we put these two ideas together, what are we referring to? We're referring to this idea of impermanence, right? Change and impermanence. And so we're contemplating that physical action, that physical positioning and so forth, and being aware that it is impermanent. And by being there very much in that moment, right, being very focused right here, right now, and seeing this constant change, it's also enabling us to be able to let go of various forms of desire, craving, that state of mind, for example, where we living in the past and like, oh, if only, right? We're trying to cling on to something in the past, or we might be looking forward to something in the future. Thinking like, oh, I wish that. Now, both of those, that kind of dwelling too much in the past and looking too much forward in the future, bring us away from the present, but it also then gives that element whereby it might bring in various forms of dissatisfaction, right? Because we don't have something. We want something to be like this or like that. We don't have it. So that's that point. The text itself, the sutra itself, talks about letting go of like clinging to the world. So that's a very important part. And that element, while it's not kind of explicitly given, when we might talk about being in the zone for various kinds of sports, because most sports, don't go quite so philosophical, and they don't have the same goal, of course, as Buddhist practice. Those sports and being in the zone will help you to focus on the present, but maybe when we come out of that state, we might still have those other afflictions in place. But in the Buddhist way of doing it, we're being focused on the present right now, but we're also using that to rid ourselves of those craving, that seeking for the world that brings about our dissatisfaction. Okay, so that was the first thing that we talked about in week 1. We also talked about, so this is within the category of mindfulness of the body. We also talked about some of the other aspects of mindfulness of the body as seen in the text. One of the kind of more well-known, famous, or maybe even infamous ones is contemplations on like a corpse, a dead body. And again, we've got a very powerful reminder of impermanence. So the idea was by reflecting on a body, one is seeing that one's own body is also impermanent and is also going to end up in the same state. So this is a really powerful reminder. There's more to it than that, though. Kind of impermanence and not being able to see impermanence as an infliction, of course, is a problem, but it's kind of intellectual. I mean, it goes deeper than intellectual, but it kind of is on that side. Do you think things are permanent, or do you think they're not permanent? But there's also another important element of it as well, which is simply the physical, like the attraction, the emotional attraction and clinging to the body, not just our own bodies, but also other bodies as well. So by then reflecting on bodies in general in this way, can also help to overcome this kind of sensual craving. So this particular teaching was classically only taught to monks and nuns and monastics. It was not taught to lay people. I still want to mention it because I don't want to kind of whitewash it, because I do know some places just kind of like won't mention it at all. It's like, and I think by not mentioning it, there might actually be some issues. So some people For example, one of my teachers, a lay teacher, this was many years ago, who was a very devout and sincere practitioner, a really serious practitioner. But if you'd mentioned that particular teaching to her, she really just was quite, you could see she really didn't like that idea. Now, I'm not going to push the case or say, no, you must practice this. But often when people have a kind of a rejection of that, that's actually saying something. There's a reason why the Buddha taught this, and people that do have a lot of attachment to the body will find such teachings very difficult. And like many teachings, often, not always, okay, I just want to say, in general, not always, there are always exceptions. If there's a teaching that we might find like really hard or difficult, there's a good chance actually that that's probably the teaching we need most of all. It's kind of worth keeping in mind. But I don't want to give too much like emphasis on it. Mention it to you. There is this practice. If you're going to do that practice, you really need to do it with some proper supervision, because we even see within the classical text that this type of practice, if done incorrectly, can also lead to another problem as well. And particularly for people that have like very, what do they call it? It's like body dysmorphic syndrome, which is for people that look at their own body and they have like a lot of aversion to their own body. So this might include, for example, certain people that have, I don't know if anorexia would fall into this category. It's definitely a possibility. They always look at their own body and think it's like very, it's ugly, it's not attractive, and so on and so forth. If you're kind of in that situation, then this is not the practice. This is going to create actual then aversion to the body, hatred for the body, and hatred for oneself. And this is not kind of the sort of result that we want to get out of it, okay? So you just have to be a bit careful on that one there too. Okay, so that was another aspect there of mindfulness of the body. And then another really important one for mindfulness of the body was mindfulness of breathing. Now this is a teaching that's got its own kind of whole thread and focus throughout this whole range of mindfulness practices. So we can see there are whole like individual and separate like sutras on mindfulness of the breath. So the term there is ānāpāna. Ana means breathing in, and pana or prana means breathing out. Now we know the term prana is kind of a bit more famous. Often if you've had some exposure to kind of contemporary kind of explanations of often Indian spirituality in general, you hear this idea of prana as this kind of like breath energy, this kind of energy force that pervades the whole universe, for example. There's a really close parallel with the Chinese use of the word qi, and in Japanese ki. If we look, for example, at practices like Reiki, so Ling Qi in Chinese. So the Rei, the Ling, means kind of like spirit, spiritual, and then the Qi or the Qi refers to this like breath energy. And so often the way in which it's understood is Qi or Qi is this kind of universal life energy force. And it's really, really similar to the Indian use of the term prana. Now, I want to talk about that just for a moment, because I want to say in Buddhist teachings, this term prana does not have that sense. Okay, it is just breathing out. It is just this exhalation of the breath. But because I think in the West, a lot of different spiritual traditions, including all sorts of philosophies and meditation practices that have come from Asia, have been kind of a bit mashed together. The amount of times I see like Western Buddhist groups, and there might be something Buddhist group or Zen group, and then they have like the little Taoist yin-yang symbol. Now, in like this part of the world, in East Asia, people will be like, what? But like the two totally different like traditions and religions. Over in the West, just kind of like mash them together. It's all like Asian spirituality. I really don't kind of like that. It's not that I don't approve of it. It's just that I feel it's often a bit ignorant, and people think they're like, oh, they're all just the same. It's just like talking about like Asian spirituality as though it's all just this one big mass, this one big kind of homogeneous lump, and it really isn't. So to get back to the point, okay, yeah, thanks, Mika there. So lung in Tibetan, yes, I believe that's the equivalent term. Now, of course, though I would say that as far as my limited understanding of the Tibetan use of it, because it tends to be used more in Tibetan seems to be used in two aspects. One is in terms of like Tibetan medicine, but also in terms of tantric practices. So the tantric practices do have that sense of prana as kind of energy that travels through the energy channels within the body. So don't want to go into a whole different topic of tantric teachings. So, kind of you have the physical body, but then on a more subtle level, you have like the energy body, the pranic level of the body. There are different channels, so what are called nadis, which literally means streams, often gets translated as channels, through which this energy runs. And then, of course, there are energy centers, so what are called the chakras, located at different points in the body. And these branch off in many different ways. And then the energies flow, and by moving that energy through the body, one can then also elicit changes in the physical body, but also in the mental state and the spiritual state of the body. You can kind of purify oneself on that level. Now, that kind of usage definitely appears in the later tantric tradition. Yeah, when I just said before that Buddhism doesn't use it in that sense, I should make a correction. It does in the later tantric teachings, but for what we're dealing with here, you're looking at these mindfulness sutras, it does not have that sense. So I think we just need to kind of be a bit clear about what terms we have, what they mean in different teachings, different traditions, and also even different historical periods of those traditions. Okay. Okay, so just some more comments from Mitra, about the tantric practices. There are they, and there it just you can see a really close connection between prana, Tibetan lung, and then as these are brought into say Chinese Buddhism, this idea of qi and the mai, which are like the channels through the body, and then you have what's called mai lun, which are like the chakra centers as well. And the moving of those of that energy through the body constitutes an important part of that practice. But okay, back down to mindfulness. Here in this teaching, it doesn't seem to mean that at all. It's ānāpāna is breathing in and breathing out, and then this becomes like a kind of a thread that then carries through this whole practice. So on a kind of a limited level, mindfulness of the breath is one part of mindfulness of the body, and mindfulness of the body is just one part of the foregrounds of mindfulness. So if we look at it like that, it looks like, well, mindfulness of the breath is just like one little part. But if you actually go in and look at these mindfulness sutras, you can see, no, it's not like that. Mindfulness of the breath is actually kind of the thread that is used to connect them all up. So as you are going through the other forms of mindfulness, you are still using the breath as like your anchoring point. So maybe at this point, we should jump on in and have a look at the text that we've got here. Let's do that. Okay. So where are we? Okay. So here we are, mindfulness of breathing. So we looked earlier at the text, which is the grounds of mindfulness, all four of them. And then this one seems to just talk about mindfulness of breathing. There we go. ānāpāna, mindfulness of breathing. Literally, mindfulness of breathing in and mindfulness of breathing out. Okay. So we've got the usual little introduction. Thus have I heard at one time the Blessed One, the Buddha, was living at Savatthi in the Eastern Park, the palace of Megada's mother, and so forth, with lots of other disciples there. Okay, we don't need to go through all this. We rattle off all the names. It's like do a bit of name dropping of those well-known Arahant disciples of the Buddha. Okay. Now, I think the paragraph 2 is actually worth noting. On that occasion, elder monks had been teaching and instructing newer monks. So you can even see, even at the time of the Buddha, it wasn't that, it's sort of like the Buddha was the only teacher. Everyone else was a disciple of the Buddha, and they never, no one else taught anything. We sometimes get that impression if we come from a Mahayana tradition, because we're often told, that one of the differences between the Arahant disciples and the Buddha is the Arahants can't teach. Well, I'm sorry to say, they definitely can teach. We might want to say they're not as skillful teachers as the Buddha, but they could certainly teach. And they had, each of these had dozens, 20, 30, 40, maybe even more younger monastics under their guidance. And then on the Upasatta day of the 15th, so this is on the full moon day when the monastic community would get together and recite their rules of discipline, the Buddha then looked out upon the assembly and gave some instruction. He says, content with the process, so he's seeing everyone's doing well. So it's like, good work, you've been working well and you've been progressing well. And then later on, other monastics came to that place to see the Buddha as well. And more people came and more people were practicing in this. The Buddha said, this assembly is free from prattle, this assembly is free from chatter, consists purely of heartwood. Okay. Now this is kind of the idea that when the monastic community gets together, basically, if you're not talking about the Dharma, you're not talking. So people don't rattle off about all sorts of other silly things. They are focused on the teachings and focused on the practice. The Buddha then talks for a while about some of the results that can be attained by practicing mindfulness. So there are certain monastics who are arahants, who have destroyed and removed their afflictions, and the also other what we might call slightly lower levels of attainment, but saying lower is really a bit, for just a regular unenlightened common person as myself, it sounds a bit condescending. They have attained, great, they are not totally liberated, but they are almost there by practicing these teachings. Okay. And the Buddha also talks about some of the different types of practices that they engage in, the development of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the Buddha talks about the monastics who have been developing other practices too, loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity, the 4 limitless or immeasurable states of mind, the meditation on foulness, so that is the contemplating the dead body and its decomposition, and also people, monastics, practitioners who have been developing this contemplation of impermanence as well. So all of them, right, have attained results of practice. So this is again important to note for those who read we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the line at the start of the Mindfulness Sutra, which sort of says, this is the only way to liberation. Well, no, it's a one-way path to liberation, because the Buddha is saying right here that other people are practicing other things and also attaining the goal. And in this community, there are practitioners who abide devoted to the development of mindfulness of breathing. Right? Talks a little bit about how that's developed and some of the results, and then how to cultivate it. Here, the practitioner goes to the forest or the root of a tree or an empty hut, sits down, having folded their legs crosswise, sits their body erect and establishes mindfulness in front of them. Ever mindful they breathe in, mindful they breathe out. So last week, we talked a little bit about this, our location for meditation, and the basic practice of breathing in and breathing out. Then, remember, we had 4 sets of 4. Last week we looked at the first set of 4. Breathing in long, they understand I breathe in long. Breathing out long, they understand I breathe out long. Breathing in short, they understand I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, they understand I breathe out short. They train thus. I breathe in, experiencing the whole body of breath. They train thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body of breath. Now, we talked a little bit about that last week too, remember? I don't think you need the body of breath. I think it just means you breathe, experiencing the whole body. I don't think it means I breathe in, experiencing the whole breath body. I'm not really sure what a breath body is. You could read it either way. There is this reading, but I just take it to mean experiencing the whole body, because remember, this first set of 4 is using the breath, breathing in and breathing out, to establish mindfulness of the body, right? That's the whole point. So it makes more sense to me to say this is I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body. I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body. And then lastly, also, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing, calming the bodily formation. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. Now note here, he doesn't think that this body isn't breath body. It literally is the whole body. So you first breathing in, breathing out long, breathing in, breathing out short, just observing how does the breath work. Is it a short breath? Is it a long breath? Being aware of that. Then as we're breathing, we're just being aware of the whole body. And then the 4th step is to, as we're breathing in, we are then also not just being aware of the body, we're relaxing the whole body. Okay, so these are the first 4, and these correspond then to mindfulness of the body. There is a next paragraph that is mindfulness of the breath as it relates to feelings, and then mindfulness of the breath as it relates to mental states, and then mindfulness of the breath as it relates to dharmas. We're going to do those in the next 3 weeks. Practitioners, that is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. Now, this slightly obscure little term here does have a specific technical meaning. Fruit, the results of practice, are known as the fruits of practice. We kind of can say that in English, we sometimes use the term fruit to refer to a result. But if you look in Pāli or Sanskrit or Chinese, so in Pāli and Sanskrit, phala literally is fruit, like the fruit of a tree. It also means the result of something. And in Chinese, guo is literally fruit, but it also means the result. You say in guo, cause and effect, cause and result. So it's speaking of specifically about what are the results of this practice. And then just to further, prove and show that this mindfulness of the breath is used to connect through all the other ones, we then have this next paragraph here. And how bhikkhus does mindfulness of breathing, developed and cultivated, fulfill the 4 foundations of mindfulness? It says, on whatever a practitioner breathing in long, etc., 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 and going through these, experiencing the body, tranquilizing the body, right? That is when the practitioner, right, abides contemplating the body as a body. So that's mindfulness of the body. Okay. So this is the basic connection then between these. And so the sutra itself, it's pretty simple in terms of, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing out. Likewise, if it's mindfully breathing in a short breath, mindfully breathing out a little short breath, mindfully breathing in a long breath, mindfully breathing out a long breath. Now, that is really all the sutra has to say about the practice and how it's done. Last week, I just said we can use a very simple statement, right? Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in long, mindfully breathing out long. Mindfully breathing in short, mindfully breathing out short. That's one way to do it. But there are some other ways to do it, and I would just like to talk about these for a little bit today, because over the course of the development and the teachings of Buddhist meditation, there have been lots of other techniques that have come about and been used over many, many centuries. We've actually, those of you that were with us for the last course, which was Calm and Insight Meditation, we saw some of those in that particular text as well. And as I mentioned at the time, the text that we were looking at last time is a Chinese text from about the 6th century. But if you actually do a bit of research, most of the content in that text is not some particular Chinese explanation. Most of the content of that text is actually just stuff which is taken from Indian Buddhist literature. Sorry, I'm just going to check something here on the computer. Okay. And it's the same for those different types of breathing practice. Now, there's a parallel text to that one as well, which also gives a couple of specific, slightly more specific and more detailed ways of how to be mindful of the breath. And so I'd like to maybe talk about these for a few minutes today before we get into the practice. The first one is just kind of what we were doing before, is just to use that little statement, that little sentence in our head, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. And we can add to it mindfully breathing in short, mindfully breathing out short, or if it's a long breath, mindfully breathing in long, mindfully breathing out long. And that little just very simple sentence is good. It's the mind has got this like thinking function, and for most of us that is always thinking something, it's always doing something. Now, in theory, you kind of don't want that thinking. Like if you're really fully absorbed on the breath, fully mindful of the breath, entering into a state of dhyana with the breath, you probably don't want that thinking thing. But when we begin our practice, right, you have to be very clear about this. Like, you can't always just say, because I'm looking for this as a goal, therefore anything that isn't just like the goal itself is not going to help me to get there. If you want to go to the beach, you're not going to drive your car up through the sand and into the water. But if you live miles from the beach, you're going to need to take a car, drive yourself up to close to the beach, park your car, get out of your car, and then you can walk along the sand and get into the water. So likewise here, we've got this thinking process, and if we don't do something with that, we just think, I'm not going to think anything, I'm just going to focus on the breath, probably your mind will be thinking about stuff, and it will be thinking about any crazy stuff and making you be very distracted. So using that simple statement, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, then uses the mind and constantly points our focus and awareness back to the breath. So that's the first one, very simple. Another technique which is also very well established and very well used is breath counting. So there are, again, many ways of doing this. One of the simplest ways is breathing in and breathing out, count 1. So at the end of the breath, so when you're breathing, you're not counting. So breathing in, breathing out, anything. 1. Then again, breathing in, breathing out, and then you count 2. Breathing in, breathing out, count 3. Like this. So this is the basic one. This is one way of doing it. Now, there are variations. One question is, do you breathe in, out, and then count? Or do you breathe out, in, and count? So this is variations here as well. Personally, I find it easy to do a breath in and then out and then count. But that's just one way of doing it. Okay. Another way is, now there's kind of a bit of a danger here. I want to teach you and let you know about many of these different methods, but then I think I've got the problem if I tell you too many, and then you'll be like, in a moment, you'll be like, oh, which one am I doing? Changing backwards and forwards. Okay, there are lots of different methods, but when you do a single meditation session, do not change backwards and forwards. You're really just going to want to stick with one, okay? Because if you're just bouncing backwards and forwards, you'll kind of just be too worried and too concerned about the method and forget about the breath, okay? Another issue with this is what do you count up to? So some people just you just keep on counting. So in a single session, you just count as many as you count. Some others, however, do it in sets of 10. So you do 10 breaths, and then after you've counted the breathe in, out, 1, in, out, 2, in, out, 10, and then the next one you start again from 1. So this is another way of doing it. This has an advantage that otherwise, if you go for very long, your numbers get, in 2,758. The numbers get bigger. It's going to take actually more of your awareness and attention to remember those numbers and to give attention to the number. And then that's not the focus. The focus isn't about remembering a number. It's just using that counting to remind ourselves to focus on the breath. And another way, another important thing for using the counting approach is if you lose place, if you forget what number you're up to, lose count, then start again from 1. Okay, start again from 1. Otherwise, you're sitting there in, out, and then, how many was that? Was that 12? No, I think I've done 12 before. 15? 15 sounds familiar. Well, and you've just totally forgotten your breath, right? Not the point. Not the point. In, out, 1. Just go back to 1. Start it again. Clean slate. Right. So this is one method that's very useful, very simple method, breath counting in sets of 10. Okay, so a comment here from Ika. My teacher likes to suggest counting 21. Why not 10? 21 is more irritating. Okay, but why is irritating important? 21, I don't, is that because multiples of 7? A lot of Buddhist teachings do use multiples of 7, multiples of 3, 7, 9, 3 times 7, 21. I don't know. Is there some particular reason for that? I'd be kind of curious to hear. So counting is another one. More attention. Why? Because it's kind of it's not just it's like an odd number, literally. So then you have to pay more attention to it. Okay, that would make sense. You have to be aware. Yep. So again, this is another way of doing it. There are lots of ways. And I'm going to say the key thing is, if whatever method you're using helps you to focus on the breath, then it's a good method. If whatever method you're using is not helping you focus on the breath, if it's making you focus more on the numbers, then no, it's not helping. And I'll give an example here. So this was a few years ago. I had a class. In that class, so this was a Masters of Buddhist Studies. It just so happened in that class, I had 2 students that were both mathematicians, and I mean this in the sense that one has a master's degree in mathematics and the other one has a doctoral degree in mathematics. And one of those people in particular just really could not use numbers. It's not because they did not know numbers and did not know how to count, but to them numbers were not just ways of counting. How to say it? I used to kind of be a little bit like this myself when I was younger because I had also a lot of interest in mathematics. But he said, for example, and I also used to be a little bit like this myself. Different numbers, for example, represent different shapes and different colors to some people. like even to myself, sometimes like different letters, to me, each letter has its own kind of, almost seems in my mind, intrinsic like color to it. So when this student was using numbers, when they would start to bring that number up, it would make their mind go off in a totally different direction. The connotations behind that number, for example. Now that's not what you want. That's not what you want at all, because then, rather than being tools to help you focus on the breath, then they become distractions. Okay, so just to get back, whichever technique helps you to focus, that's the good technique. If it doesn't help you to focus, then it's not working. You need a different technique. So in addition to counting, there is another way, which is just simply following the breath. So the first one was like using like a verbal statement, like you don't say it out loud, but it's like a mental verbal statement, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Another way in counting, I just said some of the methods, and then another way is just following it. Now this, for some people, they might be able to do it just straight away. For some people it's hard, and this is just, you're not saying anything, you're not doing any like verbalization or using any numbers, because numbers are also a kind of a verbalization. But you're just, okay, drop everything else and just focus is entirely on the breath. Now in theory, this is kind of the result that you want to get to. This will just give you that all your mental attention is on the breath and that focus. But like I said, for some people that can be quite difficult to do right from the start, because, let's say you've had a busy day at work, or even not even a busy day at work, you've gone and done something exciting and gone and seen your friends, you come home later on that day, you want to sit down and meditate. What's going to happen? You're going to have these ideas popping up in your head, things that you've been thinking about during the day and so on and so forth. And then you're trying to focus on your breath. This thought pops up. Now, which one's stronger? If your concentration on your breath is stronger, this distracted thought is kind of going to disappear and your focus is going to continue. But if you haven't established your mindfulness very well, and that's quite a powerful thought, that's going to take over. It's the same thought as like you're sitting down and you're meditating, and then suddenly you realize, oh no, I've left a pot of tomato sauce, pasta sauce cooking on the stove. Probably you're going to get up from your seat, right? It's not just a powerful thought, it's like a potentially very emotionally charged thought. So in that case, stop your meditation and make sure the house doesn't burn down. So if you're already in a fairly calm state of mind, you can probably more quickly just follow your breath, just focus on your breath. But like I said, this might not be easy to do straight away. But this is partly why I like to teach these in this gradual process. We don't just go busy, busy, busy all day. Oh, meditation time, stop, sit down, 100% of my attention on the breath. It's probably not going to happen. But that's why we start with the body. Let's first be mindful of the body. We do some stretches, okay? As we're doing the stretches, then we do some of the stretches with the breath. Then we can sit down, readjust our posture, and then focus the breath. So we're gradually moving from a very scattered state of mind to then bringing my whole body as my object of focus, and then a part of my body, which is the part of my body which is doing the breathing, and then just the breathing itself. Right, so we're gradually bringing it in, and for most people that is the more effective way to do it, rather than scattered state of mind and then immediate concentration. However, there is some good news. As your practice develops, you will be able to do that more and more easily. Right, it's a bit like maybe say a violin player. If you were an excellent violin player, you might be able to, you could be doing something totally different, and then pick up a violin and with barely any warm-up, play a lovely tune and play it very, very well. Non-experts would have difficulty doing that. And so it's likewise for a really good meditator. They can be very, just be doing something totally different, But then, okay, time to meditate, because their mindfulness is a very strongly developed habit. When they've put the mind into that kind of groove, it will go there quickly and it will stay there quickly. So this is something that's really important for beginner meditators, and I will say most of us are beginner meditators. Things do get better. When I say most of us are, sometimes people sort of think, like, oh, I've been meditating for 3 years, I'm no longer a beginner. I say, well, what have you been doing for 3 years? Practice once a day. I'd still say practicing a little bit of time a day for 3 years, you're still pretty much a beginner. And my definition, kind of the expert level, master level meditator, are people that are meditating for multiple hours a day for decades. So I pretty much reserve this for monastics who are specialist meditators. Kind of medium level is maybe 10, 20 years of practice of daily meditation with numerous longer retreats in there. So most of us are probably beginners or not really master meditators. And if you're not sure, it's better to think that we are less skillful than we actually are, because we can always benefit by strengthening our foundation. If we think our foundation is too good and then we want to advance too far ahead, without that foundation, it's not going to work. Okay, so just to recap, mindfulness of the breath is on one side part of mindfulness of the body, but at the same time, mindfulness of the breath is also the connecting thread that runs through our ability to do mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mental states, and mindfulness of dharmas. This is really important. There are numerous ways to do it. Simplest, of course, mindful breathing in and out for short breath, long breath, mindfulness of breathing in and out for being aware of the whole body and for relaxing and calming the body. And we can maintain that mindfulness of breathing in and breathing out by a couple of things. One is that simple little statement, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in long, mindfully breathing out long, etc. We can use counting, so breathing in, breathing out, 1, breathing in, breathing out, 2, etc. Maybe we do sets of 10, maybe it's open-ended. If we lose count, just come back to 1. Or we can, if we've kind of got a fairly calm mind, or the mind is starting to develop that calm and focus, we can dispense with the little words and sayings, and we can dispense with the counting, and we can just follow the breath. Just as you breathe, just be aware of that breath and make sure that that mindful awareness of the breath remains uninterrupted throughout the whole process. Okay. Breath, breathing, very important. I know you know how to breathe. Just don't stop. Okay, we're now going to flip now. I'm going to flip camera and we're going to do a few stretches before we get into our meditation for the day. That was a nice mindful mouthful of water. Okay, change camera. Oh, sorry, I need to drop down my camera here as well. Okie dokie. Okay, now I was just wondering last night when I do these stretches, are you people out there also like getting up and doing some stretches, or are you just like sitting back in front of your TV? It was funny because like, okay, Matt, you go do that and we'll just chill out here. Okay, I hope you can get up. I don't know if you've got the space. I do hope you do have some space, but it is helpful. It's good. So, mindfully aware of the right foot and the movements of the right foot back the other way. Mindfully aware of the physical movements of the body. Mindfully aware of the left foot and its movements and actions. Mindfully aware of the left foot back the other way. Okay, then hands on knees, and we're just going to squat down, mindfully aware of the knees And stretching back, opening the backs of the legs, mindfully aware of the knees and legs, and stretching back. One more time. Okay. Standing up. Then we're going to go to the hips and the waist. Hands on your hips. Mindfully aware of your hips and waist. Okay, stretching around. And of course you've got a bit bigger range of movement here. You get more body parts. So just be aware of all those sensations and feelings in the body. Okay, and back the other way. Of the body. Okay. Just move over on the side so I've got a bit more ceiling space. Hands in front of the chest. Now we're going to coordinate these movements with the breath, remember? Breathing up, right, stretching up, breathing in. Exhaling down. Stretching the backs of the legs, breathing out. Breathing in, coming up. Breathing out, down. Stretching up. And down. One more. And relaxing to the sides. Okay, with the head and neck sideways, left and right. Mindfully aware of the position of the head and neck. Relax your shoulders as you do this. Back to the center. Last one's up and down. Down you go. Stretching the neck. Up. And down. Okay, back to the center. Okay. Let's get our cushion and get ready for our sitting session. Flip it the other way around. Okay. So make sure, am I supposed to flip camera here? Okay. So make sure you're comfy. We've talked about our sitting posture. I'm going to sit in a so-called half lotus. Just like to stretch my lower back. Sideways. Okay, remember when you're doing all these, you're being mindful of the body. Stretch forward. And stretch up. Okay, make sure your clothing is comfortable and loose. If you've got watches, necklaces, other items, glasses, take those, put them on the side. I just leave mine on so I can keep track of the time. If you ever go on retreats and you've got someone whose job is to be the timekeeper, it's one of the worst jobs in a retreat. Because everyone else can just like focus, focus, focus. And this timekeeper, you're like focus, focus. Oh, have I missed the time? Okay. It's not good for mindfulness. We're just being mindful of the clock. Okay, that's enough complaining from me. So, now that you've got your posture, and just remember, note one of the key things, not so much your legs, but the position of your hips, so that your lower back can be up nice and straight. So you're sitting up straight. Your chest can be open and full, and you can breathe without being like hunched and constrained in your chest, okay? Position of your hands, again, likewise. It's good in the front here, but it doesn't have to be. Take a couple of deep full breaths. Okay, now close your eyes. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. So you can use either that technique or breath counting or following the breath. And just stick to one of these techniques for this session. Don't change halfway. But whichever technique you're using, be mindful of both breathing in and breathing out. If at some point you are distracted and lose your focus, it's okay, it's pretty common, normal. It's not what we want, but it's very much normal, it's going to happen. So as soon as you notice, just bring your attention back to your breath. And be patient, no rush. We're first just going to work on mindfulness of the breath, breathing in and out, long and short. Mindfully breathing in and mindfully breathing out. going to move to becoming aware of the whole body. So mindfully breathing in, aware of the whole body, mindfully breathing out, aware of the whole body. Mindfully breathing in, aware of the whole body. Mindfully breathing out, aware of the whole body. If you have difficulty, a good place is just feeling the expansion and contraction of your chest. As you breathe in, chest expands. It also tilts on the angle. And as you breathe out, it contracts and the angle lowers as well. Just being mindful of that inhalation within the whole body and the exhalation within the whole body. If you get distracted and your mind wanders off, as soon as you notice, just bring it back to the breath. Mindfully breathing in, relaxing the body. Mindfully breathing out, relaxing the body. So just continue that awareness of the whole body. We're just going to let it be nice and relaxed. Of course, while maintaining our proper meditation posture. Take a nice deep full breath in, breathing all the way out. Slowly rock the body left and right, slowly transitioning from a passive state to an active state. Leaning forward, bending at the waist. And then both the left and right knee in turn, stretching the back and the sides. Warm up the palms. Covering over the eyes, massaging around the eyes, eye sockets. forehead, move to the temples, down the cheeks, the ears, top to bottom, back of the head and neck. Okay, one more time. Shoulders and arms. Chest, abdomen, stomach, and then your lower back. Okay, so relax the body. Okay, you can unfold your legs, and then just massage or rub down your legs as needed. Particularly as noted, if you get numbness, pins and needles in your legs or feet, then do this and just don't be in a rush to get up, okay? You don't want to try to stand up when your legs aren't working properly. Not fun. Not fun at all, okay. And come back up here and just readjust my camera. Okay. How are you all feeling? Okay, I see we've got Venerable Guanzin has joined us online a few minutes ago, probably right in the middle of that meditation session, so glad you could join us, Venerable. Hope you're having a good day, or good evening, I think, probably where you are. Okay. Well, that was our session for today. Again, just continuing with mindfulness of the breath, and particularly using that then to become more aware of the whole body, to relax the whole body. Now, of course, in this little last few minutes of the class, if you've got any questions or anything you want to say or share, please feel free to do so. Just throw it down there in the comment section. I always say this and I get a bit of a delay, of course, before you get my message, so I'll just kind of maybe talk about something else and just see when anything you have to say comes through. Oh, okay, a comment from Tim comes through here. My mind was all over the place, but still a very nice session. Okay, Tim, where is your mind? Why is it all over the place? I guess, I'm guessing you've just headed home recently, huh? So maybe you've got a lot of things going on there and all sorts of things taking place in your mind and in your life. So yeah, sometimes that does happen. Sometimes sometimes we do have sessions like that where the mind is just like you're thinking, this mind is crazy, and it can even happen too for experienced meditators. And the trick, I think, is not to think like, oh well, if I've been meditating longer, it's just never going to happen. It's how we respond to it. It's how we respond to it. And so, sometimes if the mind's like that, we can kind of fight it a bit. I remember at a retreat, it was a couple of years ago now, I had one of the retreatants who thought like, before I began the 7-day retreat, I thought having, a 7-day retreat would be like sitting down and having a cup of coffee with my own mind. It makes sense, so lovely, just sitting there and it's just me and my mind. We're just having a lovely little chat. He said, but I actually discovered it was like wrestling an anaconda. So those anacondas are those giant, huge, 10-meter long Amazonian snakes that can probably eat like a whole like alligator or something, just swallow it whole. And wrestling is just going to like wrap around your body and just squash you like a sponge. That's what beginners do. They wrestle with the mind when the mind is out of control. But sometimes, you just got to be patient with it. So you don't. There's also a difference between being patient to like just letting your mind be a mess. It's also not saying that. You just continue on, right? So mind's doing its crazy thing. and I'm going to focus on the breath. And so it's crazy. If you drop your focus away from the mind and then you're like, I'm going to fight this crazy, the crazy gets crazier. Okay. But it's also not to say, oh, well, if it's crazy, then I'm not going to focus on the breath at all. I'm just going to let it be it's crazy. And then it's just going to be it's crazy. So you just bring it back. And slowly, ever so slowly, that focal point, that calming effect that we get from that mindfulness of the breath will start to take over. And, that kind of calmness that comes about, I think when we first begin a practice, this isn't just, what I'm saying now isn't just specifically for you here, Tim, sort of implying that you've never meditated before, because I know you definitely have. I'm just saying, like, this kind of situation in general. What was I saying? It comes in different levels, and I think when we first begin the practice, there's a lot of people in their first meditation session, they get quite blown away by, like, wow, I felt so much more relaxed. It feels very amazing and wonderful. So if your mind's normally at this kind of scattered level and you go to this kind of level of calmness, this is a big difference in our experience, and it can be really like, wow. But as we know, the more we practice, and I don't just mean longer in a single session, but just like over the months and years, at first, if our, kind of the boundaries of our experience are chaotic state of mind and slightly more calm, we think that this is the whole range. And as we continue to practice, we realize that, like, the amount of calmness and concentration and the depth of that potential relaxation, it's far more than we could ever, possibly imagine. And you'll find that, like, on a longer retreat, one session, yeah, you're a bit calmer. 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, yeah, you're even more calm. But you might still find on, like, day 3, day 4, that every now and then you realize, like, oh, I've just even gone to, like, this even slightly deeper level. And it's not just kind of calm in the mind, but also, like, really permeates through the body. Now, there's a couple of comments. I actually haven't shown these parts of the text, but there are a couple of comments in some of the scriptures where the Buddha is talking about these practices and then they're leading to the state of dhyana. And he gives a couple of metaphors. One of them is like a person on the super, super hot day. Like, we're thinking about, like, imagine where the Buddha lived. So this is kind of northern India on a hot day, like 40 degrees or something. And you're just, like, oppressed by this heat. And you jump into a lovely, cool pond of water. And that coolness of the water, from head to toe, oh, it just feels wonderful. And it says, that there's not a single part of the body which is not touched by the coolness of the water. And that's kind of what it's like. That calmness isn't just, like, mental. It's permeating. It permeates through the whole of our embodied existence. And by embodied existence, I'm talking about the body, the mind, and all those elements, kind of the psychophysical, whatever you want to call it, bunch of stuff that comprises who we are. And, you just get it. It's just constant practice. Just repeat. It's a very well-known line in the Dhammapada, which says, don't overlook the benefits of a small good deed, because drop by drop you fill up the barrel of water. And it's like that. Just sometimes think of your practice like that. I don't have to worry about long sessions, just each breath. Each breath I practice is one drop. Every drop I do is one drop more than I had before. It's not much more, but that's not the point. We're not, it's just drop by drop. We can't do multiple drops at a time. You can only breathe one at a time. You try to do too many, your breath will actually get into a non-calm state. Drop by drop, slowly but surely. And after a while, it will build up into this very powerful practice. Your overall general state of mind will just be calmer and clearer. And also then when you need to, when you're like, okay, time to meditate, we'll be able to very quickly get into that very calm and clear state. From that calm and that clarity, we see things clearly. We see things unfiltered by ego and what we want to see and our biases and our prejudices. And we see things, we see things as they are. And thus we can overcome the causes of dissatisfaction in our lives. And we can also stop creating causes of dissatisfaction for other people too. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope the quality came through all right. As I said, I'm recording all these now, like separate. So when I hit the stream button on my software, it also records it. So, and then I'm going to be also moving these up onto YouTube as well. So just having like a better quality backup, just in case the streaming isn't so wonderful. We'll still have like a really high quality recording as well. Okay, comment from Tim, that was very helpful. Thank you for joining us. Okay, see you back again, same time next week. Oh, I just thought, Tim, if you're back in Europe, I don't know what time of the day you are watching this class. Are you up at like 2 o'clock in the morning or something? Okay, maybe I don't want to know. If so, you're either up very early or you need to get to bed. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, everyone. I'll catch you all same time, same place next week, where we're going to be dealing with mindfulness of the feelings, but still continuing with the breath. Okay, everyone, take care.